A racist white passenger blatantly demanded that a black woman vacate her VIP seat, claiming she was unworthy of sitting in such a position. However, when her true identity was revealed, the situation took a dramatic turn, leaving not only the passenger but everyone else on the flight utterly speechless. An unexpected twist shattered toxic prejudices, delivering a powerful message about resilience and equality. If you wish to continue spreading meaningful stories about courage and justice, don't forget to subscribe to this channel today. On International Flight 7112, preparing to depart from New York to Oslo, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin was tranquil. The gentle hum of the aircraft's engines blended seamlessly with the soothing voice of a flight attendant instructing passengers to settle into their seats. Outside the window, the late afternoon sunlight cast a golden-orange glow over the runway, creating a breathtaking view. Amara Johnson sat in seat 1A, right by the window, quietly taking in the scene. As the CEO of Johnson Innovations, a pioneering tech company, she was on her way to finalizing a critical contract with European partners, a significant milestone for both her career and her company. Amara knew this flight was more than just a journey. It was a testament to years of hard work and triumph over countless prejudices. With neatly styled curly hair and a sleek black blazer, Amara exuded confidence while maintaining a sense of humility. She opened the compact suitcase on her lap and skimmed through her final notes on the contract. Around her, the first-class cabin carried a faint aroma of high-end perfumes and the polite murmurs of a few other passengers. A flight attendant handed her a glass of lemonade, to which she responded with a soft smile and a quiet, "Thank you." Yet, Amara couldn't ignore the curious glances from some of the other passengers. Some discreetly eyed her, while others whispered amongst themselves. It seemed the presence of a black woman in first class took them by surprise. This wasn't the first time she had encountered such stares. For Amara, it was just another part of the many challenges she had faced on her journey to success. The challenges awaiting Amara were far greater than these fleeting glances, but at this moment her focus was singular, completing her work and enjoying the flight in peace. But could this peace truly last? The peaceful atmosphere in the first-class cabin of Flight 712 remained, but for Amara Johnson, the feeling of being the focus of unwelcome gazes was impossible to shake. She adjusted the silk scarf on her shoulders, a habit that helped her regain comfort and confidence whenever she entered spaces where she knew she would be judged. "Strange, isn't it?" a voice whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, coming from a nearby row. "Is she sitting in seat 1A?" The voice was followed by a quieter but equally sharp reply. "I thought these seats were usually reserved for others." A few light chuckles rippled through the cabin as if it were a harmless joke. But Amara knew all too well the meaning behind those words. She didn't need to turn her head to look. She was far too accustomed to this type of murmur, veiled comments laden with implications but cloaked in a veneer of politeness. She wasn't one to let such remarks wound her, yet they always served as a reminder that no matter her achievements, she was still up against deeply ingrained prejudices simply because of her skin color. At the far end of the first-class cabin, Olivia Carter entered with an air of confidence. Olivia, a white woman with perfectly styled golden hair, wore a coat from the latest collection of a luxury fashion house. Her smile seemed tailor-made for exclusive galas or magazine covers. Olivia scanned the first-class cabin, her gaze sweeping over each passenger as if evaluating who deserved to be there. When her eyes landed on Amara, there was a brief flicker of surprise, followed by a subtle chill that was hard to miss. She said nothing, but the decisive way she turned to speak to her companion Emily, a younger woman with a timid expression, spoke volumes. Olivia came from a prestigious family where maintaining status and image was paramount. From a young age, she had been taught to prove herself perfect to meet the expectations of a demanding mother and a career-driven father. The harsh lessons of preserving power and position had ingrained in her a belief that no one should surpass her, especially not in spaces she considered exclusively hers. "Unbelievable," Olivia whispered to Emily, loud enough for Amara to hear. "It seems like anyone can sit here now, doesn't it?" Emily offered a nervous chuckle, clearly uncomfortable with the comment. "Maybe it's just a coincidence," she murmured, trying to diffuse the tension. But Olivia wasn't letting it go. She tilted her head slightly, her icy gaze lingering on Amara once more. Amara looked up, her eyes meeting Olivia's for a fleeting moment. She said nothing, but her calm, composed gaze, honed through years of perseverance, seemed to make Olivia blink and turn away. "Strange," Olivia muttered, this time quietly enough for only Emily to hear. Perhaps there was a mix-up with the seating. Amara didn't respond. She had learned to pick her battles, and this wasn't the moment to engage. She knew her presence alone, her simply sitting in that seat, was already a powerful statement. But inwardly, she couldn't help but sigh. Even at the pinnacle of success, she still had to face moments like these. A flight attendant walked by, delivering a second glass of orange juice to Olivia. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Carter," the attendant said with a polite smile. "Is there anything else I can assist you with?" After receiving feedback about the situation, head stewardess Sarah Lang approached her expression with a blend of concern and professionalism. "Ms. Carter, Ms. Johnson," she began with a steady voice, "we understand this situation is causing discomfort for both parties. Perhaps we can find a compromise." Turning to Amara, Sarah's tone softened slightly. "Ms. Johnson, if you would agree to move to seat 2C, also in first class, we can arrange additional services for you." But before Amara could respond, Olivia interjected. "Exactly," she said loudly, her tone triumphant. "She should know better and move." Amara raised an eyebrow, her gaze steady as she looked at Sarah. "I paid for seat 1A, she said firmly. "I see no reason to move simply because someone else thinks they're more entitled than I am." "Oh, no, thank you," Olivia replied, though her gaze flicked toward Amara once more as if to reassert her unspoken claim to dominance. She adjusted her expensive handbag on her shoulder with a haughty gesture, as if sending a message that she belonged in this space. And Amara did not. The air seemed to hang still for a few seconds, but for Amara, it felt like a stark reminder. This journey was not going to be the peaceful flight she had hoped for. Not long after Olivia Carter settled into her seat, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin began to shift. The peaceful silence was interrupted by her sharp footsteps and muttered complaints as she rose from her seat. Her stance was full of arrogance, her carefully painted lips pressed tightly together as if preparing to deliver an unchallengeable proclamation. Olivia marched straight to seat 1A, where Amara was seated. She stopped and tilted her head, scrutinizing Amara as though evaluating an out-of-place object. Her cold, judgmental gaze swept over Amara's elegant blazer, barely concealing the mix of surprise and irritation in her expression. "Excuse me," Olivia began, her voice sweet yet laced with an underlying frost. "I think there's been a mistake here." She nodded slightly toward Amara as if attempting a facade of politeness. "This seat, seat 1A, is usually mine. I always sit here." Amara looked up from her notebook, her eyes calm but piercing as she met Olivia's gaze. "This is the seat I reserved," she replied, her tone steady yet resolute. "Perhaps you should double-check your ticket." Olivia's smile faltered briefly, but quickly regained its poise. "Oh, I'm a premium member with this airline," Olivia said, as though that status alone justified her claim. "I always sit in 1A on flights like this. I'm sure you'd be more comfortable sitting further back, perhaps in the premium economy." The final remark carried a biting sarcasm, as if Olivia had just offered a perfectly reasonable solution. Around them, passengers began to take notice, a few curious glances sneaking toward the unfolding scene. Amara remained silent for a brief moment, as though considering her response. "I reserved this seat weeks ago," she said, her voice even yet weighted with firmness. "This is my seat, and I have no intention of moving." Amara's calm demeanor only seemed to irritate Olivia further. She stepped back, crossing her arms as her gaze swept over Amara once more, as though searching for another justification for her demand. "Do you even know who I am?" Olivia asked, her tone now sharp, shedding its earlier veneer of sweetness. "I'm a Premier Elite member. I've been flying first class with this airline for years. And you?" Amara didn't reply immediately. Instead, she held Olivia's gaze, her eyes unwavering and filled with quiet determination. "I'm Amara Johnson," she said, her voice deliberate and unwavering. "And I reserved this seat through my work. If you have an issue, I suggest you take it up with the flight crew." Olivia's mouth fell open, clearly unprepared for Amara's composed yet pointed response. After a moment of stunned silence, she turned abruptly to her companion, Emily, her face a mask of frustration. "Unbelievable," she muttered loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "They let anyone sit here nowadays?" Amara didn't flinch at the remark. She returned her attention to her notebook, pretending not to hear, though inside she felt a wave of indignation rise. She was accustomed to being judged, but that didn't mean she had to accept it. The cabin buzzed with whispered conversations as passengers murmured among themselves. Olivia remained standing, her arrogance evident in every gesture. This wasn't just about claiming a seat. It was a declaration that she believed she had the right to decide who belonged and who didn't. But Amara had no intention of letting that happen. The silence in the first-class cabin had now turned into a stifling atmosphere. Olivia remained standing, clearly not ready to back down. She took a deep breath, adjusted her jacket as if to amplify her authority, and then turned to face Amara, her gaze now more resolute. "All right," Olivia said, her voice deliberate, emphasizing each word as though addressing someone in need of correction. "If you're so certain this is your seat, prove it. Show me your ticket." Amara looked up, her expression calm yet unwavering. "No problem," she replied, reaching into her bag and pulling out her ticket. Handing it to Olivia, she maintained her composed but firm demeanor. "Here's the proof. Seat 1A, just as I reserved." Olivia glanced at the ticket briefly, her face showing a flicker of dissatisfaction. Instead of conceding, she turned toward her companion. "Emily," she called urgently, her tone insistent. "Come here. I need you to help me sort this out." Emily, who had been sitting quietly a few rows back, reluctantly stood. With an air of hesitation, she approached Olivia, her eyes darting quickly toward Amara before settling uneasily. "What's going on, Olivia?" Emily asked softly, trying to diffuse the situation. "Her," Olivia said, pointing at Amara with visible irritation. "She insists this is her seat, but I know for a fact this seat is always for premium members like me. You need to get the flight crew involved." Emily hesitated. "But if she's reserved it, maybe we should just let it go." Olivia stared at Emily, disbelief etched across her face. "Emily, do you understand? This isn't just about a seat. It's about principle. If I give in now, they'll think anyone can take my seat. Do you think that's acceptable?" The growing tension between the three began to draw the attention of other passengers. A middle-aged man, sitting nearby dressed in a sharp suit, shook his head slightly before leaning toward Olivia. "Honestly," he said in a self-assured tone, "sometimes it's best to let things go. If this seat means that much to her, perhaps you should just let her have it. It would avoid unnecessary trouble." His comment seemed to pour fuel on the fire. Olivia whipped around, her eyebrows arched in indignation. "Are you saying I should give up my seat? For her?" She gestured toward Amara, her eyes flashing with thinly veiled disdain. "I'm a Premier Elite member with this airline. I've flown first class for years, and now you're suggesting I should step aside?" The man shrugged, clearly uninterested in continuing the debate. "I'm just saying it might be better to keep the peace." Meanwhile, Amara remained silent. She saw no need to engage further in the argument. The glances from other passengers, the hushed whispers, and Olivia's arrogance, all of it reminded her that this wasn't merely a dispute over a seat. It was a challenge to her dignity and the rights she had worked so hard to secure. When her eyes met Olivia's again, Amara allowed herself a subtle smirk. It wasn't a smile, but a gentle, meaningful expression. She would not back down. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin grew more tense than ever, as hushed whispers spread through the rows of seats. A sense of unease began to settle over the passengers as a young flight attendant arrived, followed by Sarah Lang, the flight manager, a sharp-featured, middle-aged woman with an air of professionalism. Sarah entered with the confidence of someone accustomed to handling difficult situations, but the moment her eyes landed on Olivia Carter, a glimmer of recognition flickered across her face. "Good evening," Sarah said, her voice steady but authoritative. "I've been informed there's a bit of confusion over seating. How can I assist?" Olivia seized the opportunity, stepping forward and pointing toward Amara. "Thank you for coming, Sarah. Here's the issue. Seat 1A has always been mine. I'm a Premier Elite member, and there's been some sort of mistake allowing this person to sit here." Sarah glanced at Amara, her eyes briefly noting Amara's elegant blazer, though her expression remained neutral. "Ma'am," Sarah said, her tone polite but slightly detached, "could I please see your ticket?" Without hesitation, Amara handed over her ticket for the second time. Sarah examined it carefully before returning it with a thin smile. "Yes, seat 1A does indeed belong to you, Ms. Johnson." Olivia's face darkened momentarily, but she quickly recovered her characteristic poise. "I understand," Olivia said, her tone sweet but laced with disdain. "However, I've been flying with this airline for over 10 years. I've always sat in this seat. Surely she can sit somewhere else? I'm sure she'd be more comfortable in another spot." Amara raised an eyebrow, her expression calm but sharp. Before she could respond, Sarah spoke again, her voice now taking on a conciliatory tone. "Ms. Johnson," Sarah said with a strained smile, "I understand you've reserved this seat, but for the benefit of all passengers, would you consider moving to another seat in first class? We can arrange for you to take seat 2C, which is also very comfortable and similar to this one." Amara felt the heavy silence envelop in the cabin. Several passengers were now watching her intently, while Olivia stood with her arms crossed, clearly convinced she was about to prevail. "No," Amara said firmly, her voice steady but authoritative. "I reserved this seat, and I see no reason why I should have to move. If there's an issue, I think it would be best for you to address it according to the airline's policies, rather than expecting me to compromise." Sarah hesitated, clearly unaccustomed to such resolute opposition. Before she could respond, Olivia interjected, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "She thinks she has a right to be here," Olivia said, emphasizing each word with mockery. "It's hilarious. If I were her, I'd know better and avoid inconveniencing others." Amara turned to look directly at Olivia, her calm demeanor now replaced with a cold but commanding gaze. "If you think my presence here inconveniences you," Amara said, her voice sharp as a blade, "then the issue isn't about Seaton. It's about how you perceive the worth of others." Amara's words cut through the tension like a knife, silencing Olivia momentarily. But instead of backing down, Olivia gripped the strap of her handbag tightly, her expression demanding action as she turned to Sarah. Sarah, clearly feeling the pressure, faced Amara again, this time with a hint of unease. "I'll call the supervisor," she said, her voice quieter now. "Perhaps they can help us resolve this situation." Amara nodded slightly, maintaining her composure. "I think that's a good idea," she replied. "I'll wait." Amara's confidence began to shift the perspective of some nearby passengers, who now regarded her with a mixture of respect and curiosity. But for Olivia, this was a battle she could not afford to lose. She stood tall, her gaze sharp and challenging, as Sarah hurried away to seek higher assistance. No one said another word, but the atmosphere in the cabin was now taut as a wire, bracing for the next escalation. Sarah Lang had just left to fetch the supervisor, and the tense atmosphere in the first-class cabin lingered. Olivia remained standing, her eyes sharp as knives, fixed on Amara with evident displeasure. Arms crossed, her posture was both defensive and smug, as though convinced the matter would soon be resolved in her favor. Amara, in contrast, sat calmly, betraying no hint of unease. She quietly took her phone from her bag, her fingers moving swiftly over the screen before bringing it to her ear. Olivia noticed the action and frowned slightly. "So, you're calling someone to fix this for you?" Olivia sneered, her voice dripping with mockery. "I don't think a phone call will change anything here." Amara glanced up, her gaze calm, like a still lake. "I don't need to change anything," she said, her voice low and steady. "I'm simply reporting an issue that shouldn't have occurred in the first place." With that, Amara returned her attention to her call. "Marcus," she said, her tone professional yet tinged with an edge of frost. "I'm on flight 7112 to Oslo. There's an issue with my seat. Another passenger, claiming to be a Premier Elite member, is trying to force me out of the seat I reserved." Olivia froze for a moment, her eyes widening before quickly regaining her composure. She stepped forward, her voice cutting into the conversation. "Excuse me. I don't think this situation needs to be escalated like this. I was merely trying to resolve a small misunderstanding." Amara looked up again, her calm demeanor unchanged. "A small misunderstanding, you say?" she replied, her voice sharp yet controlled. "A small misunderstanding is when the name on your ticket is misspelled. This is not a misunderstanding. This is disrespect." Olivia's cheeks flushed, not with embarrassment, but with anger. "I didn't mean anything by it. I just think someone of my status should have priority. Don't you find that reasonable?" Amara returned to her call. "You hear that, Marcus?" she said, her tone still professional but firm. "I'm being challenged on my rights because someone believes their status entitles them to override others. I want this incident documented and addressed immediately. If not, I'll escalate it as a systemic issue to the board." On the other end, Marcus's voice came through, clear and decisive. "Amara, I understand. I'll handle this right away. We'll contact the flight crew directly. Please remain in your seat." Amara nodded, affirming her control of the situation. She ended the call and carefully returned her phone to her bag. Then she looked back at Olivia, her expression radiating confidence. "The matter has been reported," she said succinctly, her tone soft yet imbued with undeniable authority. "I suggest you prepare to explain yourself to your superiors if they have any questions." Olivia stepped back slightly, looking genuinely flustered for the first time during the confrontation. However, she quickly regained her smug demeanor. "You think calling someone will make me change my mind?" she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." Amara didn't respond immediately. Instead, she adjusted her scarf deliberately, then spoke, her words deliberate and cutting. "I don't need to change your mind, Olivia. What I need is for the system to understand that in this world, no one has the right to overpower others simply because they think they hold more authority." Her words hung in the air, slicing through the tension in the cabin. Olivia stood there, her face flushed red, but she said nothing further. The other passengers, many of whom had initially seemed to side with Olivia, now remained silent, their gazes turning toward Amara with newfound respect. Amara sat upright, her eyes steady and unwavering. She knew this battle was far from over, but she had begun to shift the narrative, and she had no intention of stopping. The silence following Amara's sharp rebuttal didn't last long. Olivia, her face still flushed with anger, retreated to her seat and pulled her phone from her handbag. Her movements were theatrical, as if she wanted everyone in the cabin to know she wasn't going to let this go. "Just wait," Olivia muttered, her voice loud enough for Amara to hear. She dialed quickly, her sharp eyes darting toward Amara in an unspoken challenge. When the call connected, her tone shifted to one of saccharine authority. "Hello, it's me, Olivia Carter," she began, her voice pitched dramatically. "I'm on Flight 712 and there's a serious issue. It seems my seat has been mistakenly given to someone else, and now I'm being told to sit elsewhere, even though I'm a Premier Elite member. You know, I've been flying with this airline for years and I've never encountered such unprofessional behavior." Amara listened without reaction, but she could feel the gazes of several passengers fixed on her. The cabin was now abuzz with whispers, and passengers were divided. Some murmured that Amara should just give in to avoid further trouble, while others stayed silent, disapproving of Olivia's conduct but reluctant to intervene. "This is disappointing," a man seated nearby muttered, as though echoing Olivia's sentiment. "Sometimes a little concession can make things easier for everyone." Hearing this, Amara sighed softly. She was all too familiar with these prejudices, the expectation that someone like her should always be the one to yield, regardless of being in the right. Olivia turned toward Amara, phone in one hand and the other pointing directly at her. "I'm speaking to my superiors," she said, her tone laden with defiance. "You'll have to give up that seat soon enough." Her eyes flashed with a challenge as she glanced around at the other passengers. "We all know who belongs here, don't we?" she said loudly, as if rallying support. "I've flown first class for years, and now she thinks she can take my seat just because she booked it?" Her emphasis on the last word dripped with mocking disdain. A passenger sitting nearby shook his head slightly, but Olivia continued, her voice rising. "There must be some mistake. I can't believe someone like her could pay for a seat like this. Does anyone here agree with me?" The murmurs among the passengers grew louder, and curious glances were cast toward Amara. Yet she remained silent, her serene gaze meeting Olivia's fury head-on, silently conveying that she would not be intimidated. Beneath her bravado, Olivia felt a creeping unease. Amara's unyielding composure not only frustrated her, but also stirred buried memories of times she'd been forced to prove herself to those her family considered undeserving. To Olivia, this was no longer about a seat. It was a battle to defend the image she had meticulously built in the eyes of others. Moments later, Sarah Lang returned, accompanied by a supervisor, a middle-aged man with a stern demeanor. Sarah cleared her throat, attempting to regain control of the escalating situation. Miss Johnson, Miss Carter, she began, her gaze shifting between the two. We've reviewed the situation and would like to propose a solution to ease the tension. Ms. Johnson, would you consider moving to seat 2C? It's still in first class, and as I mentioned, we'd like to resolve this matter amicably. Amara looked up, her eyes meeting Sarah's before shifting to the supervisor. Her voice was gentle, yet firm as she responded. As I said before, she began, enunciating each word. I reserved this seat weeks ago, and I see no reason why I should have to give it up simply because someone else feels they are more entitled to it. Her words cast a frosty silence over the cabin. Olivia, hearing Amara's response, let out a scoffing laugh full of derision. You think that just because you booked it, you have the right to refuse? This is first class, not a test of endurance. Sarah hesitated, clearly unsure how to navigate the confrontation. The supervisor, sensing the need to intervene, spoke up, his tone conciliatory. Miss Johnson, we understand this is a difficult situation, he said. But, for the sake of all passengers on this flight, could you please consider making a small concession? Amara turned to the supervisor, her calm demeanor unshaken. I respect your desire to resolve this, she said, her voice unwavering, but I do not believe that asking me to sacrifice my rightful claim to appease someone else is a reasonable solution. The whispers among the passengers grew louder. A few sided with Amara, murmuring that she was being treated unfairly. One middle-aged woman quietly remarked, "She has every right to keep her seat. They can't force her to move just because a Premier Elite member complains." Others, however, continued to support Olivia. "She's a Premier Elite member," one passenger whispered. "They should resolve this quickly so the rest of us aren't disturbed." Yet, a well-dressed woman seated nearby finally spoke up, her voice soft but cutting. "It's surprising that she thinks being a Premier Elite member gives her the right to insult others." A younger man across the aisle added, his voice clear and firm, "The issue isn't about entitlement. The issue is that Ms. Johnson booked this seat, and that cannot be overridden." The atmosphere in the cabin became more polarized. Some passengers regarded Olivia with discomfort, while others remained silent, unwilling to involve themselves in the dispute. Amara sat composed, undeterred by the murmurs around her. She knew this was about more than just a seat. It was about asserting her right to be treated fairly, no matter what others believed. Sarah, the supervisor, and Olivia stood in place, each with their objectives. But it was evident that none of them could shake Amara's resolve. What had started as a disagreement over a seat had now evolved into an unyielding standoff. The tension in the first-class cabin had reached its peak. Sarah Lang and the supervisor stood frozen before Amara's unwavering determination, while Olivia refused to concede. The murmurs from the surrounding passengers added to the suffocating atmosphere. Just then, the cabin door opened, and two sharply dressed men stepped in. Their arrival immediately captured the attention of everyone present. The first man, tall with salt and pepper hair and a stern expression, introduced himself. "I'm Michael Harris, Director of Customer Services for this airline," he said, his voice exuding authority. The second man, younger and holding a tablet, gave a slight nod and added, "I'm Daniel Clark, Assistant Operations Manager." They stopped in front of Amara and Olivia. Michael surveyed the situation, his sharp eyes moving from person to person before settling on Sarah. "We've been informed about an issue in the first-class cabin," he said, his tone calm but firm. "We're here to understand what's going on." Olivia wasted no time, seizing the opportunity to steer the narrative. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Harris," she said, her tone sickly sweet yet calculated. This is just a small misunderstanding, but as a Premier Elite member, I believe I have the priority right. Seat 1A has always been mine on previous flights, but today it seems there was a mistake, and it was given to someone else. Michael glanced at Amara, who remained calm and composed despite Olivia's remarks. He gave a slight nod, signaling for her to speak. "Ms. Johnson, would you like to share your perspective?" Amara inclined her head slightly, her gaze steady as she met Michael's eyes. "I booked this seat weeks ago," she began, her voice clear and confident. "I've presented my ticket, and the fact remains that I've done nothing wrong. However, I've been asked to give up my seat simply because someone else feels entitled to it. This isn't about the seat itself. It's about my rightful claim being disregarded." Michael listened attentively, his expression growing more serious. "Thank you, Miss Johnson," he said, turning back to Olivia. "Miss Carter, do you have anything to add?" Sensing the situation turning against her, Olivia began to lose her composure. "I don't see why we're even debating this," she snapped, her voice sharp and angry. "I'm a Premier Elite member." She, Olivia emphasized the word with barely veiled contempt, "does not belong here. This is my seat, and I expect the airline to do the right thing." Her words brought a stunned silence to the cabin. Michael frowned deeply, and Daniel glanced down at his tablet, making a note. Several passengers inhaled sharply, visibly taken aback by Olivia's overt hostility. Amara, unfazed by Olivia's comments, maintained her composure. She met Michael's gaze steadily. "I believe you've heard enough," she said, her voice soft but commanding. "I'm not the problem here. The problem is how power is being used to intimidate and undermine fairness." Michael nodded, a hint of agreement in his expression. He turned back to Olivia, his tone colder now. "Ms. Carter, your remarks are inappropriate. Your Premier Elite status does not grant you the right to insult or demean others. This airline does not tolerate such behavior." Olivia stood stunned, her lips pressing tightly together as if searching for a retort, but unable to find the words. The surrounding passengers had stopped whispering entirely, the cabin now enveloped in a tense silence as they awaited what would happen next. Michael addressed Sarah and the supervisor. "We will resolve this situation immediately," he said. Then, turning back to Amara, he continued, "Ms. Johnson, I apologize for this inconvenience. You will retain your seat. As for you, Ms. Carter," his gaze shifted to Olivia, his expression stern, "if you continue to cause disruptions, we will have no choice but to ask you to leave this flight." His words landed with the weight of a final verdict, leaving Olivia visibly cornered. She stood there, her face red with anger and humiliation, unable to muster a response. Amara, on the other hand, remained poised and composed. Her confidence and reason prevailed. The confrontation was nearing its conclusion, and now every eye was fixed on Olivia, the woman who had unwittingly pushed herself to the edge of disgrace. The atmosphere in the cabin felt frozen as Michael Harris, Director of Customer Services, stood tall, his stern gaze fixed on Olivia Carter. Every word he was about to say would determine the outcome of this tense confrontation. Olivia remained rooted in place, clutching the strap of her handbag tightly, her face red with both anger and embarrassment. Michael addressed her in a cold, unwavering tone. "Ms. Carter, I have reviewed the situation and see no reason why Ms. Johnson should give up her seat. Your behavior on this flight is unacceptable. I regret to inform you that I must ask you to leave the flight." Olivia's mouth fell open, her expression a mix of rage and disbelief. "You can't do this," she shouted. "I'm a Premier Elite member. I have every right to be here." But Michael was unmoved. Your membership privileges do not include the right to demean or insult other passengers. We will not tolerate this behavior. Ms. Carter, Michael began, his voice steady and resolute. After reviewing all the facts and listening to both sides, we've reached a decision. Seat 1A rightfully belongs to Ms. Johnson, who booked it according to our policies. She will not be asked to move. Olivia inhaled sharply, clearly preparing to argue, but Michael raised a hand, cutting her off. Furthermore, he continued, your conduct and language during this situation are unacceptable. We do not condone any actions or statements that are disrespectful or discriminatory toward our passengers. These words struck Olivia like a sharp blow to her pride. Unbelievable, she screeched, her voice echoing through the cabin. You're taking her side because of what? Don't you see who I am? I've flown with this airline for years, and this is how you treat me? Michael remained composed. Your Premier Elite status does not exempt you from our code of conduct. This incident has been documented and will be reported to senior management. For now, I must insist that you leave this flight. His statement landed like a final verdict. Olivia stood frozen, unable to comprehend what she had just heard. What? She yelled, her shrill voice causing some passengers nearby to grimace. You can't throw me off this plane. I'm not going anywhere. Michael didn't waver. He turned his head and gestured toward security personnel waiting at the cabin door. 2 guards stepped in, their demeanor professional yet authoritative. If you refuse to comply, we will have no choice but to involve security, Michael said, his tone measured but firm. Olivia stepped back, her eyes wild like a cornered animal. Fine, she shouted. You'll regret this. I'll call my lawyer, I'll go to the press, I'll make sure your airline pays for this unprofessional treatment. She glanced around the cabin, seemingly seeking support from the other passengers. But all she received were cold, indifferent stares or the occasional shake of the head in disapproval. Not a single person spoke up in her defense. Amara remained seated, her calm gaze fixed on Olivia, as if the other woman were nothing more than a passing storm. Without a word, Amara conveyed the strength of her resolve and rationality, rendering Olivia's threats meaningless. The security guards approached Olivia, gently but firmly insisting that she leave the plane. She resisted briefly, shouting accusations and threats, but her defiance was quickly subdued. She was escorted out of the cabin, her angry footsteps echoing down the aisle like a punctuation mark to her outburst. The cabin door closed behind her, and an eerie silence settled over the first-class cabin. For a few moments, no one spoke, until Michael turned to Amara, inclining his head respectfully. Ms. Johnson, on behalf of the airline, I apologize for what you've had to endure today. We will ensure this matter is properly addressed and hope you will continue to have confidence in our services. Amara nodded, maintaining her composure without offering a smile. Thank you, she said, her voice gentle yet commanding. I hope no one else will have to go through what I just experienced. Michael nodded in agreement before he and Daniel exited the cabin, leaving Amara to sit in the newly restored peace. The other passengers, many of whom had initially murmured in support of Olivia, now looked at Amara with quiet admiration. Without saying another word, Amara had won the battle, not just by keeping her seat, but by upholding her dignity with strength and grace. Olivia's fury faded with the sound of the cabin door closing behind her, leaving the first-class cabin quieter than ever. The flight resumed its journey in newfound peace, but Amara knew the matter was far from over. This was merely the beginning of something much bigger. The following morning, at the airline's headquarters, the incident had become the center of attention. A video, secretly recorded by a passenger during the first-class confrontation, had been uploaded to social media. The clip quickly went viral, amassing millions of views within hours. The footage of Olivia shouting, demanding her rights, and being escorted off the plane by security was widely shared, accompanied by harsh criticism. What made the video particularly compelling, however, was the image of Amara, calm, sharp, and resolute, standing her ground and defending her rights without yielding to pressure. She became a symbol of fairness and resilience in the face of injustice. The airline, now facing a wave of public outrage, was forced to respond swiftly. Senior management convened an emergency meeting to address the incident. Sarah Lang, the flight manager, and her supervisor, who had earlier asked Amara to compromise, sat in the meeting room with tense expressions. Michael Harris, who had directly handled the situation on the plane, entered with a grave look on his face, followed by several senior members of the management team. "You've all seen the video," Michael began, his voice heavy with disappointment. "This incident has not only damaged the airline's reputation, but also exposed a lack of professionalism in how the crew handled the situation." Sarah tried to maintain her composure, but her hands trembled visibly. "I was only trying to resolve the issue as quickly as possible," she said, her voice faltering under Michael's sharp gaze. "I thought asking her to switch seats would be the best way to diffuse the tension." Michael frowned. "You thought asking a passenger with a valid reservation to sacrifice her rightful claim was the best solution?" He paused, his piercing eyes sweeping across the room. "No, that was not a solution. That was unfair, and it runs counter to the values our airline seeks to uphold." His tone grew colder and more resolute. "Sarah Lang, you and your supervisor are hereby suspended, effective immediately. An internal investigation will be conducted to fully review the incident. We cannot tolerate unprofessional behavior that compromises the integrity of our airline." Sarah said nothing, her head bowed, her face pale. The other supervisors in the room remained silent, understanding the seriousness of the situation. Days later, the airline issued an official statement through the media. They apologized to Amara Johnson and all passengers who had witnessed the incident. The statement also announced a comprehensive reform program, including retraining staff on conduct and conflict resolution, as well as a renewed commitment to promoting diversity and inclusion. Public reactions, initially scathing, softened as the airline's sincere apology and concrete reform plans were made clear. For Amara, this was not just a personal victory, but a powerful message that fairness and respect are non-negotiable values. Her story continued to spread, becoming an emblem for anyone who has been underestimated or treated unfairly. Through her composure and determination, Amara demonstrated to the world that sometimes the greatest changes begin by standing up for the small but rightful things. Just days after the video went viral, Amara Johnson received an email from the airline marking a significant milestone in the story. Michael Harris, Director of Customer Services, sent an official apology on behalf of the entire company. "Dear Ms. Johnson," the email began, "we sincerely apologize for the incident that occurred on Flight 712. We fully recognize that you were treated unfairly and faced inappropriate behavior from both another passenger and certain members of our team. This represents a major failure in upholding our commitment to respect and fairness for all passengers." The email did not stop at an apology. It included a detailed action plan that the airline publicly announced across various media channels. The airline committed to retraining all employees on codes of conduct, with a particular focus on diversity and inclusion, establishing a new reporting system to allow passengers to transparently and easily report similar incidents, conducting regular internal audits to ensure adherence to processes and policies. The conclusion of the email conveyed deep sincerity. You have not only defended your rights, but also helped us recognize critical weaknesses in our system. We are deeply grateful to you for speaking up. Amara read the email in silence, feeling the acknowledgement carried weight far greater than a typical apology. Yet, what moved her the most were the emails from strangers, people who had watched the video and felt inspired by her actions. Dear Ms. Amara, one email read, I watched the video about you, and I cannot thank you enough for your resilience. As someone who has often felt underestimated, I deeply resonate with what you did. Thank you for standing up not just for yourself, but for everyone who has ever been treated unfairly. Another email shared, I'm a young professional who has always been hesitant to confront injustice. After seeing how you handled the situation with calm and confidence, I feel like I can do it too. Thank you for being an inspiration. Amara took the time to reply to each email, her words filled with sincerity and gratitude. For her, this story was not just a personal victory, but an opportunity to spread a message about fairness and respect in society. A few weeks later, the airline held a press conference to announce its reform plans. Amara was invited as an honorary guest. She stepped onto the stage to the respect of hundreds of employees and attendees, delivering a brief yet powerful speech. Change is never easy, but it is necessary. I hope this story serves not just as a lesson, but as a reminder that fairness and respect are not privileges. They are basic rights of every individual, and when we stand together, no one can be left behind. The hall erupted in thunderous applause. As she stepped out of the press conference, Amara looked up at the vast blue sky above, feeling a profound sense of relief. She had not sought fame, but she knew her actions had created a ripple effect, not just on that flight, but across society. And that was enough for her to move forward with a proud heart and an unshakable spirit. Just days after the video went viral, Amara Johnson walked out of the press conference with recognition and respect, while a different story was unfolding on the other side, the story of Olivia Carter. After being escorted off the flight, Olivia returned home in a rage, consumed by feelings of betrayal and humiliation. But the worst was yet to come. The video of the first-class incident spread across social media at lightning speed. Olivia's arrogant remarks and lack of self-control became the focal point of widespread criticism. This is a textbook example of privilege and arrogance, one commenter wrote beneath the video. Being a Premier Elite member doesn't give you the right to belittle others. She didn't just disrespect Amara, she made all first-class passengers look bad, another added. The airline did the right thing by removing her from the flight. As more voices joined the conversation, the pressure mounted. Olivia received an official notice from the airline stating that her Premier Elite membership had been revoked. The airline cited severe breaches of the Code of Conduct and disruptive behavior as the reasons for the decision. The notice also included a stern warning. Your actions on Flight 7112 disrupted the experience of other passengers and harmed the reputation of our airline. Such behavior will not be tolerated. This decision is final. Olivia felt as though her world was collapsing. All the privileges she had once taken for granted, access to VIP lounges, priority bookings, first-class service, were now gone. This was more than a material loss. It was a crushing blow to her already shaken sense of self-worth. For Olivia, it wasn't just the material privileges that stung. Everything she had done, pursuing her Premier Elite status and indulging in extravagant spending, had been her way of asserting herself and seeking the acceptance she always craved from her family. With those privileges stripped away, Olivia was forced to confront a deeper question. Were her efforts to maintain her image truly worth it? Weeks later, Olivia sat alone in her spacious apartment, her empty gaze fixed on the window. The phone rang incessantly, but she ignored it. Friends who once surrounded her now kept their distance, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. She began rewatching the video of herself. Her sharp words, her arrogant demeanor, her flushed face filled with anger. For the first time, she saw how terrible she had looked. No longer the accomplished and confident woman she prided herself on being, Olivia saw only someone driven by arrogance and a lack of compassion. She sighed, shame washing over her. For the first time, she wondered if things could have gone differently had she acted with calm and fairness. One day, Olivia received a letter from an old friend, a former colleague with whom she hadn't spoken in years. The letter was brief but deeply meaningful. Olivia, I saw the video. I'm not writing this to criticize you. Enough people have done that. I just want to say that it's never too late to change. We all have moments of weakness and mistakes, but what matters is how we learn from them and become better people. If you're ready, start with yourself. Those words lingered in Olivia's mind for a long time. Perhaps it was time for her to face the truth and change, not for anyone else, but for herself. Olivia's story didn't end with consequences. It marked the beginning of a new journey. She began attending courses on emotional management and empathy, and volunteering in community programs to learn how to view life from others' perspectives. While Amara continued her journey, spreading strength and inspiration, Olivia quietly embarked on her path to redemption. This story wasn't just about a victory. It was a reminder that everyone has the chance to change, if they dare to admit their mistakes and learn from them. This story isn't just about standing up for personal rights. It's a lesson about fairness, respect, and the power of resilience. Amara showed us that no matter how challenging, calm determination and self-respect can shift an entire system. At the same time, Olivia's journey reminds us that mistakes don't define us. How we learn and grow from them does. What do you think of the way Amara handled the situation? Would you have acted differently if you were in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like it, share it to spread its meaningful message, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring content. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.